No gas lines, no insulation, no central heating, just frozen ground, snow-packed doors, wind that sliced through walls like knives. Modern furnaces keep you alive at the push of a button. Peasants didn't have that luxury. Yet their methods worked so well that some might outmatch what sits in your home right now. Picture it. A child wakes in the middle of the night, frost crawling across the walls, breath hanging in the air. One mistake, one missed fire, one broken roof, one storm too strong, and the entire family could freeze. That was the razor's edge of medieval winter. And still, these peasants endured. How? Not with luck, with invention. Their world didn't allow weakness. Every scrap of warmth was a weapon. They built hearths that radiated for hours after the fire went out. They angled houses to trap the weak winter sun. Walls of clay and stone held what little heat they could steal. Roofs stuffed with straw. Animals turned into living heaters. Would you share your bedroom with a pig just to stay alive? They did, and it worked. But warmth wasn't only a physical fight. It was communal. The hearth wasn't just a fire. It was a stage. Families huddled close to cook, eat, and tell stories. Smoke clawed its way up through the rafters. Neighbors repaired each other's roofs. Villages lit bonfires that turned the square into a glowing island of survival. Heating was never just about comfort. It was about togetherness. Without that, winter wasn't just cold. It was deadly. Now compare that to modern life. Heat today is invisible. A vent hums. A thermostat clicks. And you forget the danger outside. But in the medieval world, warmth consumed every sense. You saw flames dancing. You felt stones radiating under your feet. You heard animals shifting in the stalls. You smelled smoke thick in the air. Heat was alive. And keeping it alive was constant work. And here's the twist. These weren't crude fixes. Many of their ideas, radiant floors, solar, heating, heat reflectors, still exist in our homes today. Techniques we call sustainable design were just survival strategies then. Would your furnace still impress you if you realized peasants cracked the same code 700 years ago? This story isn't about misery. It's about resilience. Survival in the medieval winter wasn't passive. It was an art form. Every ember mattered. Every wall carried heat. Every neighbor kept another alive. And if one invention sat at the very center of this battle, the survival machine that kept families breathing, it was the hearth. Not against a wall, not hidden away, but burning in the middle of the room like the heart of a body. And in the next chapter, we step inside that circle of fire to see how a simple hearth could mean the difference between life and death. Smoke did not vanish neatly up a chimney. It rose into the room, thick and choking, drifting out slowly through a hole in the roof. Eyes watered, throats burned, lungs filled with soot. But peasants accepted the cost. Would you rather cough through the night or freeze to death before dawn? For them, the answer was clear. The hearth was not only heat, it was everything. Food bubbled in pots above the flames. Light flickered across wooden walls when no candle could be spared. Families huddled shoulder to shoulder, telling stories, singing songs, or praying. Sparks snapped into the dark. The hearth turned a cold shell into a breathing body. Without it, the house was uninhabitable. With it, even the harshest nights could be endured. The hearth created more than warmth. It created identity. To have a hearth meant you had a home, a family, a place in the world. Fires were passed down, rekindled from neighbor to neighbor, sometimes carried across villages in pots of glowing embers. Imagine depending on your neighbor's fire, not just for cooking, but for survival itself. That was community in its rawest form. But the hearth carried danger. One spark too many, one ember landing on straw, and the house could vanish in flames. Every family lived with this gamble. Warmth versus wildfire. Yet the gamble was unavoidable. Without fire, death from cold was certain. Which risk would you take? Modern furnaces hummed silently hidden in basements. The medieval hearth roared, smoked, and blazed in the open. It demanded attention. It demanded labor. It demanded vigilance. Every log chopped, every ember tended, was a reminder. Warmth was never free, and yet the hearth alone was not enough. Even with its glowing stones and choking smoke, the night air pressed in cold and merciless. Peasants needed another ally, not in fire, but in the sky itself. Because when the sun was weak and low on the horizon, they learned how to trap its power. In the next chapter, you will see how medieval peasants used the sun itself as their hidden furnace. Imagine a peasant waking at dawn in the dead of winter. The night has left frost creeping across the walls, the hearth reduced to glowing embers. But outside a pale sun begins to rise, weak, low, distant, and still powerful enough to be captured. Homes were not built by chance, but by design. They turned sunlight into a weapon against the cold. But when the sun broke through, doors and shutters were flung wide open to flood the room with warmth. Every clear day was an opportunity, every shadow a threat. Their materials played a role too. Straw wood and clay, all abundant, all insulating, all chosen with brutal practicality. Straw stuffed between beams trapped pockets of air. Clay sealed drafts. Wood layered across walls added another barrier against the creeping cold. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was accidental. And think about this. We pride ourselves on green design and passive solar heating. Yet peasants mastered those principles with nothing but dirt, straw, and stone. They bent the environment to their will, not because they were enlightened, but because failing meant death. But even the sun had limits. A clear sky could not warm a freezing night. No wall could hold back every draft, which is why peasants needed another line of defense. A layer above their heads that was more than shelter. It was nature itself woven into a shield. The next chapter takes us upward to the roofs of medieval homes. Not just any roofs, but thatched crowns of straw thick enough to trap the very breath of the house. This was insulation at its rawest. It held the line between comfort and frostbite. Look up inside a medieval peasant's home. You will not see timber beams polished smooth. You will not see tiles neatly laid. You will see a roof stuffed thick with straw, yellow, coarse, alive with the smell of earth. To a modern eye, it looks fragile, primitive. But in winter, that straw was the difference between life and death. The thatched roof was nature's insulation system. Peasants wielded it with ruthless efficiency. Straw was cheap. Straw was abundant. Straw was easy to stack, layer upon layer packed so tightly that air itself became a barrier, trapping warmth, slowing the escape of heat. Imagine standing beneath a blanket made not of fabric, but of hundreds of thousands of hollow stalks, each one locking in precious degrees of warmth. And it worked. While icy winds howled outside, the thick mat above sealed in the heat rising from the hearth. The roof became the lungs of the house, breathing in smoke, exhaling warmth. Without it, fire bled upward into the night sky. Families froze. With it, the home became a cocoon of survival. But the roof did more than hold heat. It kept water out. Snow piled on top melted and slid away. Rain battered the thatch but rarely broke through the dense weave. Even in the depth of winter, a proper thatched roof preserved the fragile warmth beneath. Would your modern roof survive without tar or tiles? For peasants, straw alone carried that burden. There were risks. Insects, rodents, rot if neglected. And in summer, a stray spark could turn the house into a fireball. But winter did not allow hesitation. Replacing the roof was community duty. Neighbors gathered, ladders rose, bundles of straw lifted high. The work a ritual of survival. Each repaired roof a promise. We will not freeze this year. The symbolism of thatch was powerful, humble, but vital. ugly but life-saving. A peasant family might have little food, little clothing, few possessions. But if the roof above was thick and tight, hope remained. It was protection crafted from the fields, nature reshaped into a fortress. Think about your own home. Insulation today is hidden in fiberglass or foam. You do not see it. You do not touch it. You do not think about it. But for medieval peasants, insulation was alive, visible, touchable, fragile. Every time peasants stepped outside and saw the heavy roof drooping with snow, they knew their survival depended on that mass of straw holding strong. But even the best roof could not heat a house on its own. Warmth had to be generated before it could be trapped. And here peasants revealed their most shocking trick. They invited living creatures into the heating system. From the rooftops we descend into the stables, where cows, pigs, and sheep were not just food or labor. They were walking furnaces keeping families alive. Step inside a peasant home in January and prepare for a shock. You would not only find parents, children, and grandparents by the fire. You would find cows, sheep, pigs, even chickens, living under the same roof. At first glance, it looked like chaos. Straw scattered across the floor, animals shifting and snorting, the smell of manure thick in the air. But this was not disorder. It was strategy. The animals were heating the house. Every creature gave off warmth. A single cow radiated like a small space heater. Several animals packed together raised the entire room's temperature. This was not theory. It was survival math. Would you let a pig sleep near your children if it meant they lived through the night? Peasants did not hesitate. The design of their homes reflected this truth. In many regions, the stable was part of the same structure. Animals occupied nearly a third of the space. Their breath fogged the air. Their bodies raised the heat. Their waste became fuel when wood was scarce. Nothing was wasted. Even the most unpleasant byproduct could become fire. But this was more than temperature. Sharing space with animals created intimacy. Families slept to the rhythm of cows moving in straw. They woke to roosters crowing inside the house. They relied on livestock warmth as we rely on central heating. The line between human and animal blurred. The house became a living organism, every body feeding its heat into survival. The downsides were brutal. The smell suffocating, parasites spreading, disease thriving. But when the choice was sickness or freezing, peasants accepted the risk. Cold killed quickly. Insects only tormented. It was an ugly trade, but a necessary one. And here lies the irony. Today we boast of sustainable heating and energy reuse. But peasants had already solved it centuries ago. They wasted nothing. They even counted the warmth of a cow. Modern people recoil at the idea of sleeping beside livestock. For peasants, that cow was the reason they woke alive. But even animal heat could only go so far. Warmth rose upward and escaped into the roof. The ground below stayed icy and damp. Feet numbed. Joints ached. Illness spread. So peasants invented another shockingly modern solution. They learned to heat their floors. In the next chapter, you will walk across stones that glowed with stored fire. A medieval version of radiant heating that turned dirt into comfort. Imagine waking on a winter morning in a medieval hut. The fire in the hearth has burned low. The air is icy. Your breath hangs in front of your face. You swing your legs out of bed. Instead of stepping onto frozen dirt, your feet touch warmth. Not the warmth of carpets, not the hum of electric coils, but heat rising straight from the ground. Peasants had invented their own radiant floor heating centuries before modern engineers claimed it. The trick was simple but ingenious. Stones heated near the central fire until they glowed without flame, then buried under wooden planks, clay, or packed earth. For hours, they released stored energy upward, transforming the floor into a living heater. Imagine walking barefoot on dirt in winter and feeling warmth rising into your skin. For peasants, this was more than comfort. It was survival. Other variations existed. Brick floors that absorbed hearth heat, clay-packed floors that bled warmth back through the night, semi-subterranean homes that combined earth insulation with heated stones. Not flashy, not perfect, but it worked. Heated floors gave real health benefits. Cold, damp floors bred illness, rheumatism, fevers, lung infections. Stones dried the moisture, reduced mold, and gave families a chance against the chill. But this technique demanded labor. Stones had to be heated daily. Fires had to burn long enough to charge them. A misplaced stone could crack floors or spark fire. Yet peasants accepted the work because the reward was enormous. Warmth underfoot when cold crept deepest into the body. Think about that. Today, radiant floors are luxury features in modern homes. Peasants armed only with stone and sweat beat us to it. They built silent, steady heaters when most of the world still battled frostbite each morning. Still, they knew one truth. No system lasted forever. Stones cooled, fires dimmed, and the cold always returned. So they needed a way to take heat with them. Out into the fields, onto the roads, even across the yard. They needed warmth that could travel. The solution was portable warmers. Heated stones wrapped in cloth, glowing pots of embers hidden in containers. Heat tucked inside cloaks and pockets like contraband against the frost. Step outside a peasant's home in midwinter. The hearth glows faintly behind you, but the fields demand your labor, and the cold waits to strike. Medieval peasants carried their fire in their hands, their portable defense against winter's attack. But stones were only the beginning. For longer-lasting heat, peasants turned to chauffettes, small metal pots filled with embers or charcoal, carried by hand or balanced on laps. These glowing boxes became mobile hearths. Women used them while spinning or mending clothes. Travelers carried them on frozen roads. In the village square, a chauffet might glow like a tiny sun against the snow. Would you risk walking with a smoldering pot of fire beneath your cloak? They did. These devices were not toys. Overheated stones could burn through fabric and seerskin. Chauffets spilled embers if tipped too far. Sparking fires in straw filled homes or setting cloaks alight. But when the choice was frostbite or flame, peasants chose flame. They did not stop at stones and pots. Coals were carried in wooden boxes lined with ash. Heated bricks were wrapped and tucked into bedding. Clay jars filled with embers became hand warmers. If the fire could not follow you, you carried a piece of it yourself. Even here, peasants sought beauty. Chauffets carved with handles, engraved with patterns. Artistry in the face of survival. It was not enough to live. They wanted warmth to carry dignity. But portable heat solved only part of the battle. Nightfall still came. The hearth cooled. Stones faded. Embers died. Peasants turned to the one place they could trap heat most effectively. The bed itself. The sun has vanished. The hearth has dimmed to red coals. Outside, the wind claws at the walls. The temperature falls so fast you see your breath hang in the dark. The night was the deadliest enemy. How do you survive hours of merciless cold when the fire cannot last until dawn? Peasants turned their beds into furnaces. The tool was the warming pan, a shallow container of brass or copper filled with hot coals, slid between layers of hay and wool. Sheets warmed, blankets softened. The icy sting of night was pushed back. Imagine climbing into bed and feeling fire beneath your legs. Not a heater humming quietly, but real flames inches from your body. Dangerous, yes, but without it, sleep could mean death. These were not crude contraptions. Long handles kept hands safe. Many pans decorated, polished, engraved. Survival wrapped in ritual. Beds themselves became fortresses. The canopy bed more than privacy. Curtains of wool, linen, or animal skins sealed the sleeper in a miniature room. Inside, warmth built and held. Outside, frost thickened on roof beams. Inside, families breathed without ice forming on their sheets. Layering turned the effect stronger. Wool blankets, Sheepskins, furs piled high. Families pressed together on mattresses of hay, alive with the scurrying of rats and insects. Comfort sacrificed, warmth preserved. The hearth burned bright, but wood was scarce. A single log vanished in minutes. Wood was precious, backbreaking to gather, dangerous to steal from lordly forests. So how do you make one fire do the work of three? You reflect it. Peasants discovered that fire projected heat, placed the right surface behind the flames, and the warmth bounced back into the room instead of bleeding away. The earliest reflectors were smooth stones, polished until they caught the glow and threw it outward. Later came bronze, iron, copper plates. Rooms that once shivered in half dark now pulsed with doubled warmth. Imagine sitting by a small fire and suddenly feeling the heat surge, because a wall behind it hurled the flames back toward you. Not magic. Survival physics. Reflectors also protected homes. Flames too close to wood could ignite disaster. Reflectors redirected heat away from walls. They were shields as much as amplifiers. In larger homes, panels of polished metal could be moved, guiding warmth toward beds or work tables. Imagine aiming fire the way we aim light today. And some were beautiful, engraved patterns, surfaces gleaming like art. Even in poverty, fire became spectacle. But reflectors were not foolproof. Placed poorly, they scorched walls, burned skin, turned safety into danger. Still, peasants stretched every spark. One fire became many. Every ember multiplied. Every flame bent to their will. Unlike the hearth or the warming pan, this was no private heat. It belonged to everyone. Neighbors dragged logs and branches, scraps of wood piled high. The fire was fed until it towered above them, casting light for streets and warmth for bodies. Villages came alive around these blazes. Men, women, children stood shoulder to shoulder, thawing fingers, stamping feet, breathing relief. Would you face the night alone? When the fire of the village promised survival together, the bonfire was more than warmth. It was ritual. Stories told in the glow, songs rising, dances in circles, festivals piercing the gloom of the season. The Yule fire burned for days, marking the triumph of light over darkness. At moments when winter threatened despair, fire gave not only heat, but hope. Practically, these fires saved lives. Families with weak hearths survived only by its light. The bonfire became a lifeline, a public furnace for the poor, for the unlucky, for the weak. Children warmed their hands before trudging back to smoky huts. Travelers stopped to thaw frozen limbs. The fire did not discriminate. It burned for all. Danger always lurked. Embers rolling onto thatched roofs. Fires burning too hot to approach. Wood devoured faster than it could be gathered. But the risk was worth the reward. Because in a world where isolation meant death, fire meant community. And that was the truth peasants understood. Warmth was never only physical. It was social. It was spiritual. It was emotional. The crackle of flames, the glow on a neighbor's face, the rhythm of voices rising together. These were survival in its purest form. Through hearths, roofs, animals, stones, beds, reflectors, and bonfires, peasants turned a hostile world into one they could endure. They bent nature, borrowed warmth from beasts, carried fire in their hands, forged bonds in its light. Survival was never easy, but it was always ingenious. So when you look at your thermostat today, ask yourself, would you survive a medieval winter? Could you last a single night without technology, relying only on firestone straw and the people beside you? The peasants did, and they turned survival into a way of life.